It is a question whispered only in the deepest silences of the Imperium, a thought that should never form, let alone pass one's lips. For in a galaxy ruled by divine tyranny and holy fire, there are questions that burn the soul merely by existing. Yet someone, somewhere, must have asked it first. Perhaps it was a confessor who saw too much of the Emperor's design. Perhaps it was a warrior who served too faithfully, and wondered what awaited those who disappointed the Golden God. Or perhaps, and this is the darkest possibility, it was one of the prisoners themselves. The Imperium tells its people that all who are unworthy are purged, cast into the cleansing flame of holy judgment. But that is a lie, a necessary one, perhaps, but a lie all the same. Because not everyone condemned by the Emperor dies. Some are taken, some are kept. They vanish into silence, erased from record, their names struck from the great ledgers of Terra. No body is found, no execution witnessed, no grave permitted. Only absence remains, a clean erasure where a life used to be. Those who know fragments of the truth call them the forgotten, or the nameless ones, or most chilling of all, the Emperor's prisoners. And though no one dares to speak of them openly, the rumors persist, carried in coded prayer scrolls, in the mutterings of mad astropaths, in the static hiss between the stars. Some claim the prisoners are heretics too valuable to kill, psykers whose screams feed the Astronomicon, their agony turned into light for the galaxy's navigation. Others whisper that they are traitor primarchs, chained beneath the throne, their divine blood sustaining the Emperor's decaying form. Still others, the most heretical of all, insist that the prisoners are not enemies, but saints, loyal servants whom the Emperor could not let die, for their knowledge of his great and terrible secret was too dangerous to release into death. But the truth, the real truth, is far worse. Because those who have glimpsed it, even for a moment, lose their minds. The few scribes who dared to record what they saw have long since been silenced. Yet one voice remains, one testimony that escaped the censors of the Inquisition, hidden away in a decaying data vault beneath the ruined spires of Luna. It begins simply, almost pitifully, with a line written in shaking script. I was not meant to see them. But I did. And now, I can never unsee what the Emperor keeps beneath the throne. That is where our story begins, with one soul's descent into the forbidden depths of the Imperial Palace. A place where light itself trembles, where prayers become screams, and where the air carries the taste of eternal suffering. This is the truth that no servant of the Imperium is ever meant to know. This is the dark secret buried beneath the golden throne itself. This is what happens to the Emperor's prisoners. Stay with me until the end of this story, because only then will you understand the terrible secret the Imperium hides, and why no one who learns it ever leaves the throne world unchanged. Our tale begins not in glory, but in silence, the kind of silence that presses against your mind, whispering thoughts that aren't your own. The man who wrote the forbidden testimony was no heretic, no rebel. He was a scribe, a lowly servant of the administratum assigned to maintain the endless archives of Terra. His name was erased, but in the record he left behind, he called himself Lorien. Lorien was a man of faith, the kind who believed the Emperor's light could never falter. Yet faith is brittle when placed too close to truth. His duty was simple, to copy data scrolls cataloging the power conduits and psychic amplifiers beneath the palace. Thousands of lines of sacred text, each one meaningless, without the proper cipher. But one day, a misrouted file crossed his desk, an encrypted transmission marked throne substructure, level Omega Null. Omega Null. The designation did not exist. No record acknowledged it. No servitor, no tech priest, no magos dared speak of it. And yet, the data seal was genuine, bearing the sigil of the Adeptus Custodes themselves. Curiosity, that ancient and fatal human flaw, took hold. He decrypted the file. What he found wasn't words. It was sound. A voice, faint, distorted, but human, echoing through miles of static and machine noise. A single phrase, repeated over and over, each time weaker than the last. We are still here, we are still here, we are still here. Lorien thought it was a corrupted file. But then came the second message, clearer, trembling, spoken in the language of High Gothic. Tell him, tell the Emperor, we still remember. It should have been impossible. No one speaks to the Emperor. No one even approaches the throne without permission. And yet this message, buried deep beneath the palace, called out like a cry from the grave. For days, Lorien could not sleep. The words burned in his mind, a haunting rhythm that followed him even into prayer. He began to notice small things, power fluctuations in the archives, sudden blackouts that left the air thick with the smell of ozone and blood. And then, the summons came. A custodian, tall as a god and silent as death, appeared at his chamber door. No words were spoken, only a gesture, to follow. Down they went, through endless corridors of golden shadow. The air grew colder, heavier, until even Lorien's breath turned to mist. They passed levels forbidden to all but the Emperor's chosen, sanctums where machinery older than humanity pulsed like veins beneath stone. At last, they reached a gate of black metal. It bore no sigils, no prayers, only a single warning engraved in words that should never exist in any imperial tongue. Beyond this door, there is no light. The custodian placed a gauntleted hand on Lorien's shoulder and whispered his first and only words. You will see, and you will forget. Then the gate opened, and the world Lorien thought he knew ended forever. Lorien would remember that sound for the rest of his cursed life. It wasn't a scream, not exactly. It was something older, deeper, like the groan of a dying star collapsing in on itself. The sound of belief being crushed under the weight of revelation. As the black gate sealed shut behind him, the light of the upper palace vanished completely. The air inside the vault was thick, alive almost, humming with static and the faint pulse of psychic energy. Each breath felt like inhaling dust and sorrow. He tried to speak, but his voice died in his throat. The custodian beside him carried no torch, no lamp, and yet faint, eerie illumination emanated from the walls themselves. They were covered in inscriptions, not words of prayer, but chains of data script and arcane sigils. Some of them pulsed faintly, as if reacting to his presence. Others wept thin rivulets of light, bleeding into the floor like tears from a dying machine. Then Lorien heard it, faint at first, a whisper, a murmur of countless voices layered upon one another. Too soft to understand, but too human to ignore. They came from deeper within the darkness. The custodian said nothing, only gestured forward. Step by step, Lorien followed the sound. The floor beneath him was smooth metal, scarred with burn marks and grooves left by something massive dragged over it long ago. And the further they went, the colder it became, until even the air itself began to crystallize, forming frost on his lips. The voices grew louder. They weren't whispers anymore. They were prayers, desperate, broken. Prayers. Thousands of them. Deliver us, O Master of mankind. Spare us the light. It burns, it burns. He said we would serve forever. The sound hit Lorien like a wave of despair. He clutched his ears, falling to his knees. Every voice carried emotion, agony, guilt, terror, but beneath it all, there was something worse, devotion. These weren't prisoners who hated the Emperor. They still worshipped him. They begged not for freedom, but for acknowledgement. At last, the custodian stopped. In the faint light, Lorien could see massive shapes ahead, towering cages of glass and metal, filled with pale, shifting figures suspended in viscous fluid. Their bodies were wrong. Some still bore the remnants of armor, Astarte's sigils, imperial eagles, others were human, their flesh fused with machinery. But all of them were alive. And every one of them was praying. Their lips moved in unison, repeating the same line Lorien had heard from the corrupted file. We are still here, we are still here, we are still here. He turned to the custodian, voice trembling. Who are they? The golden giant did not look at him. His tone was flat, mechanical, drained of all emotion. They are his prisoners. Lorien's mind reeled. Heretics. No. Traitors. No. Then what? The custodian's gaze shifted slightly, and for the first time, Lorien saw something behind the golden helm, sorrow. They are the ones he could not kill. For a long moment, silence consumed them both. Then Lorien looked closer, and realized the prisoners' eyes were open. Every one of them was staring at him. Not at the custodian, at him. And in that moment, every voice stopped, as if the galaxy itself had exhaled. Then one of the prisoners, a woman, or what was left of one, pressed her mutilated hand against the glass. Her mouth formed words that barely reached his ears. "Run." The lights flickered. The psychic hum intensified. The custodian turned sharply toward the darkness ahead, as if sensing something approaching. And somewhere, in that endless black, something moved. That question struck Lorien harder than any weapon ever could. He stood frozen among the Emperor's prisoners, beings neither dead nor alive, suspended between existence and oblivion. Their faces, blurred and distorted by the thick containment fluid, watched him as though pleading for salvation. But salvation was not what they wanted. The air trembled with psychic pressure, like the hum of a broken choir. Every breath Lorien took felt heavier, laden with a million silent screams. The custodian took one slow step forward, his armor vibrating faintly with restrained energy. "Do not speak to them," he said quietly. "Do not listen." But it was too late. The voice was already inside Lorien's head. Not one voice, many. Men, women, soldiers, saints, all bleeding into each other like a storm of thought. "He cannot end us. He made us for war, and now he makes us for silence. We are the fuel for his eternity." Lorien clutched his skull, falling to his knees as the sound flooded his mind. His vision blurred, flashes of golden light, burning planets, legions kneeling in fire. He saw visions that weren't his own, armies of the Emperor marching across time itself, and beneath them, the same faces trapped in glass, whispering for mercy. He gasped. "These are his soldiers." The custodian's expression didn't change. They were. What did they do? They obeyed. The words hit like a thunderclap. They obeyed so completely, the custodian continued, that they saw what no mortal should ever see. They walked beside him when he was still a man. They carried out his will when the stars still burned with promise. And when his will turned dark, when the price of his divinity demanded sacrifice. They saw too much. Lorien stared into one of the tanks. The fluid shimmered faintly, revealing the prisoner's face in full. It was not twisted by corruption. It was not warped by chaos. It was human, a soldier, a hero, a servant, and yet, his eyes were hollow, voids of despair. "He made us eternal," the voices whispered. "He said our service would never end." Lorien staggered backward. "You mean, the Emperor, he..." The custodian's gauntleted hand silenced him with a gesture. "Words like that will end you." The voices rose louder, pressing into Lorien's mind with desperate hunger. He tried to block them out, but fragments still broke through. "The throne is not mercy. We hold his burden. We are the chains that keep him divine." Then the lights dimmed again, not flickering, but dying, one by one, swallowed by something unseen. From the far end of the chamber came a low hum, like the intake of a colossal breath. The liquid in the containment tanks began to quiver. Ripples moved through it, in rhythm, like a heartbeat. The custodian drew closer to Lorien. "Do not move. Do not speak. What is that sound? The throne is stirring." Lorien stared into the darkness. "The throne. The golden throne extends deeper than you know. Its roots feed upon this place. These souls, they are part of it now." And then he saw it, through the fog and the faint light, something massive and terrible loomed ahead. A structure of impossible scale, golden bone and wire fused together in monstrous unity. It pulsed like a living organ. Every beat echoed through the vault. Thud, thud, thud. Each pulse carried energy, psychic, divine, and utterly inhuman. It washed over the prisoners, making them convulse inside their glass tombs. Some screamed without sound. Others whispered words of worship through bloodied lips. Lorien felt tears streaming down his face, not from sorrow, from understanding. This was no prison. This was a harvest. Every soul here was part of a machine, a living conduit feeding the Emperor's failing body above. Each mind, each tortured consciousness, sustaining a fraction of his power. The Emperor's prisoners were not punished for betrayal. They were sacrificed for his survival. The custodian's voice came again, low and cold. You see now why we do not speak of them. And for the first time, Lorien saw the faint tremor in the custodian's hand, proof that even the Emperor's chosen could still feel fear. Somewhere deeper in the vault, the heartbeat quickened. The light surged, a wave of blinding brilliance that filled the chamber. And from that light, a voice older than creation itself spoke inside Lorien's mind. You should not have come here. The thought came unbidden, as the voice filled Lorien's mind, vast, echoing, and impossibly old. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of sound that didn't move through air, but through the soul itself. You should not have come here. The words were heavy, not a threat, but a lament. A warning soaked in sorrow. Lorien fell to his knees, clutching his temples. Visions tore through his mind. Burning worlds, legions marching under the twin-headed eagle, oceans of blood that stretched across millennia. Through it all, one image repeated, the Emperor upon his throne, surrounded not by glory, but by chains of light. He tried to speak, but his voice was no longer his own. Who are you? He whispered. The answer came as 1,000 whispers layered into one. We are his beginning. The custodian moved suddenly, seizing Lorien by the arm. Do not answer it, he hissed. Do not listen. But Lorien could not look away. The tanks that surrounded them were trembling now, the prisoners within writhing in their glass tombs, mouths open in voiceless agony. Their eyes all burned with the same impossible golden fire. He made us to dream for him, the voice said. When his body failed, he needed minds to hold the galaxy together. We became his thoughts. We became his chains. Lorien's heart pounded. You're connected to him. We are what remains of his humanity. The custodian slammed his spear into the ground. The air cracked, releasing a surge of psychic resistance that made Lorien's teeth ache. You will not speak, the warrior barked at the unseen entity. You will not reach the surface. The voice laughed, or something close to laughter. It sounded like wind moving through the bones of the dead. You guard his silence, but even you know the truth. You see the cost every day. The custodian's armor trembled. For a heartbeat, the golden warrior, the paragon of imperial faith, looked tired. He saved mankind, the custodian said quietly. I will not betray that. Saved. The voice echoed. He bound you all. You mistake endurance for salvation. The air rippled. The prisoners screamed again, and for a moment, the vault itself seemed to shudder. The psychic energy surged so violently that Lorien's skin split where light touched it. He felt his consciousness being dragged inward, drawn toward something vast and bright, a sea of endless pain beneath the surface of existence. And there, beyond the veil of thought, he saw the Emperor, not as a god, but as a withered man entombed in gold, his mind stretched across time and space, fragmented into countless echoes. Each fragment lashed to a soul below, one prisoner, one life, one unending tether of torment. Together, they formed the living network that powered his divinity. The Emperor's prisoners weren't captives. They were extensions, the remnants of his will, the pieces he tore from himself to keep the galaxy burning with light. They were the Emperor, and the Emperor was them. Lorien screamed, and the world bled light. When his vision returned, he was lying on the floor, trembling. His nose and ears were bleeding. The custodian knelt beside him, visor cracked, his armor scorched from psychic backlash. You saw, the custodian whispered. You saw too much. Lorien's voice shook. He's not whole. He's divided. The custodian looked away. The God Emperor is eternal. But even eternity demands a price. From the darkness, the voice spoke again, weaker now, fading like the last ember of a dying fire. Tell them what you saw, if you dare. Tell them what it costs to keep the stars alight. Then silence. The tanks dimmed. The heartbeat of the throne slowed. Lorien rose unsteadily. The custodian's hand gripped his shoulder once more. "You will forget this," he said softly. "You will live, you will serve, and when your time ends, you will thank him for the mercy of ignorance." The golden warrior turned and began to walk toward the gate. But Lorien didn't follow. He couldn't, because now he understood. The Emperor didn't just hold prisoners beneath the throne. He was the prison, and every prayer whispered by humanity, every plea, every hymn, every act of worship, only tightened the chains further. He stumbled through the endless corridors of the Imperial Palace, his mind still echoing with the voices of the prisoners. Each step felt heavier, as if invisible hands clung to him, refusing to let go. He no longer knew how long he had been below, hours, days, perhaps years. The air above the vaults was cleaner, warmer, filled with the distant murmur of a billion prayers. Yet even here, he could still feel the heartbeat of the throne reverberating beneath his feet. When he looked at the walls, he could see faces in the gold, fleeting, faint, gone the instant he blinked. He told himself it was madness. But deep down, he knew madness was just another form of truth. He found his way back to the archives, though he barely remembered the path. The servitors stared blankly as he passed. The scribes ignored him. To them, he was just another nameless drone of the administratum. No one knew where he had gone. No one asked. But someone was watching. 3 days later, he was summoned, not by the custodes this time, but by the Inquisition. The chamber was dim and silent. A robed figure waited behind a desk of black stone, a single red eye glowing in the shadow of his hood. The interrogator spoke softly, each word measured like a knife pressed against skin. "You accessed restricted archives. You opened a sealed transmission. You entered forbidden levels." Lorien said nothing. His throat was too dry to speak. The Inquisitor tilted his head. "You saw something, didn't you?" Lorien's lips trembled. "I don't remember." "Lies." The word cracked through the air like a whip. The Inquisitor rose, moving closer. He smelled of incense and ozone. "Do you know what the greatest heresy is, scribe?" Lorien shook his head. "To look at the Emperor and see a man." The interrogator leaned in. "Did you see him, Lorien?" Lorien's vision blurred. He saw the glass prisons, the faces, the golden fire, the whisper of the voice that had spoken in his mind. He wanted to scream the truth, to tell the Inquisitor what he'd seen, to free himself from the weight of it. But the moment he opened his mouth, something stopped him. A thought, not his own. "Be silent." It was the same voice, the same tone that had once said you should not have come here. It spoke now inside his mind, calm and cold. "You will tell no one. You will keep the light alive." Lorien gasped, clutching his chest. The Inquisitor reached for him, but in that instant, the world went white. He woke hours later, alone in his quarters, drenched in sweat. The Inquisitor was gone. So were all the records of his interrogation. In their place was a sealed data scroll bearing a single command sigil, the mark of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the division responsible for psychic transmission across the Imperium. He broke the seal. Inside was a single line of text. "Your service continues, Lorien. Report to the Astronomicon." His blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guided all ships through the warp, the light sustained by 1,000 sacrificed psykers every day. And now, he was being sent there. As he packed his few belongings, he noticed something strange. His reflection, once pale and frightened, now carried a faint golden shimmer in the eyes. And when he blinked, he heard a whisper, faint and distant, but unmistakably divine. "You saw, and still you serve. You are mine now." For the first time since he entered the vault, Lorien smiled, not out of joy, but resignation. He finally understood why the prisoners prayed. They weren't begging for freedom. They were preparing for him. When Lorien arrived at the Astronomicon, the light of Terra burned brighter than ever before. To the billions who prayed daily, it was the beacon of the Emperor's mercy, the proof that their God still lived, still watched, still loved them. But to Lorien, that light was something else entirely. It was hunger. The Astronomicon stood at the heart of the Imperial Palace, an immense psychic furnace that no mortal could comprehend. Thousands of psykers were brought there every day, each one kneeling in awe before the Emperor's unseen presence. They came willingly, believing their deaths would serve him. They were right, but not in the way they imagined. Lorien was escorted through its gates by silent adepts of the Telepathica. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes hollow. They walked like men who had already died and simply forgotten to stop moving. As he entered the chamber, the world became light. Not the warmth of sunlight, but the blinding, burning illumination of pure psychic power. It stabbed through his mind like a blade, filling every nerve, every thought, every whisper of self. The adepts placed him among the others, rows upon rows of robed figures seated in circular formation around an enormous conduit that rose into the ceiling. He recognized the sigils engraved upon it. They were the same runes he had seen carved into the walls of the prison beneath the throne. He wanted to run, but even before he moved, he knew there was no escape. Then he heard the voice again, not inside his head this time, but everywhere. It came from the conduit, from the air, from the very marrow of his bones. "Welcome home." His body went rigid. The other psykers began to chant, their words merging into a single resonant hum. The sound built, spiraling higher, until it pierced through the veil of reality itself. Lorien felt his consciousness pulled outward, first beyond his body, then beyond Terra, beyond the solar system, beyond the stars. He was falling through light, through time, through memory. And there, in that infinite brilliance, he saw everything. He saw the Emperor as he was in the days before the heresy, radiant, terrible, filled with both love and rage. He saw the creation of the Astronomicon, a miracle built on blood. He saw the first psyker burned alive to fuel its flame. And he saw what came after. Billions upon billions of souls, consumed, their essence woven into a single eternal lattice that fed the dying god on his throne. He saw himself among them. His own body was dissolving, its edges fading into energy. He tried to scream, but there was no air, no sound, only light. "You are my vessel," the Emperor's voice said. "You saw, and yet you believed. That is why you were chosen." Lorien felt no anger, no fear, only acceptance, and then realization. The prisoners beneath the throne, the ones he could not kill, they were not forgotten relics. They were the foundation of this light. Each mind a flame, each flame a fragment of the Emperor's shattered soul. And now, Lorien's mind was being added to the fire. He tried to fight, to remember his name, his face, his purpose, but the light was stronger. It whispered promises of eternity, of unity, of peace bought with unending pain. He saw galaxies turning like embers in the void, and for a brief, blinding moment, he understood everything. Then the light devoured him. In the silence that followed, a new voice joined the eternal chorus. Soft, human, faintly trembling. "We are still here." And deep beneath the throne, far below the surface of Terra, one more containment tank flickered to life. The fluid within glowed faintly gold, and a new prisoner opened his eyes. His lips moved, forming words that echoed across the vault, in perfect unison with all the others. "We are still here, we are still here." The chamber was silent. The air, thick with incense, psychic residue, and the faint hum of machinery older than memory, trembled under the weight of what had just occurred. Lorien was gone. The conduits that consumed him now pulsed with new energy, feeding power into the Astronomicon above. To the Imperium, the light seemed brighter that day. To those who lived beneath the throne, it was only another voice added to the choir of the damned. The custodian stood at the edge of the chamber, unmoving. He had watched Lorien's transformation without a word, without even the twitch of a muscle. His armor gleamed with silent authority, his face hidden behind a golden mask that reflected the light of the dying god he served. He was everything the Imperium believed a custodian should be, perfect, loyal, eternal. But behind that mask, something human still lingered. He turned slowly toward the containment vaults, rows upon rows of sealed cells stretching into blackness. Inside each one floated a being that once had a name, a face, a purpose. Warriors, scholars, psykers, saints, all reduced to fragments of the Emperor's endless mind. Their whispers pressed against his thoughts like a cold wind. He had learned long ago to ignore them. But today, he couldn't. He removed his helmet. His eyes were pale, ancient, haunted. There was no pride left in them, only resignation. "Forgive me," he whispered. "Forgive me for believing this was mercy." His voice echoed faintly through the chamber. Because he remembered the first prisoner, the day the Emperor had ordered the vaults built, long before the heresy. He remembered the Emperor's face, not divine, not distant, but weary. Back then, the Emperor had not yet been a god. He was still a man burdened by visions of unending war. They must be preserved, the Emperor had said. Not punished. They carry truths that must not be lost. And so, the custodian obeyed. He built the cages. He filled them, one by one, century after century, until he realized the truth. The prisoners were not being preserved for knowledge. They were being used. Their pain, their psychic resonance, their living torment, it was all part of the machine that sustained the Emperor's fading spark. The custodian had no name anymore. That, too, had been stripped away. He was simply the warden, the eternal jailer of the Emperor's prisoners, and perhaps the last being alive who truly understood the cost of humanity's survival. He walked toward the last vault, where the newest prisoner's light flickered softly, Lorian's mind, still screaming beneath the psychic glow. The custodian placed a hand on the glass. The heat was unbearable, yet he didn't flinch. "You sought the truth," he murmured. "Now you are part of it." He turned away, moving toward the exit. Behind him, the vaults whispered like a restless ocean of souls. Thousands of voices spoke in unison, no longer pleading, no longer resisting. "We are still here." The custodian paused. For a moment, he almost turned back, almost dared to believe that they could hear him, that they still knew who they were. But he didn't. He simply sealed the door, as he had done countless times before. As he ascended back toward the surface, the great Palace of Terra stretched above him, endless golden corridors, statues of saints carved from stone, choirs chanting praises to a god who would never answer. He passed pilgrims kneeling in devotion, their hands clasped, their eyes wet with faith. They prayed to the Emperor's light, believing it to be salvation. And only the custodian knew the truth. That light was built from suffering. That faith was fed by agony. And that somewhere, deep below, the Emperor's prisoners still burned, their minds intertwined, their souls screaming in silence, their pain keeping the Imperium alive. The custodian stopped at the top of the stairway, looking back one last time. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "this is what he meant by sacrifice." Then he placed his helmet back on, hiding the last fragment of the man he once was. The door sealed behind him with a hiss, and the sound echoed through the hollow eternity beneath the golden throne. Down below, the prisoners' voices faded into the hum of the machine. Until only one sound remained, the endless, rhythmic pulse of the Emperor's throne. A heartbeat made from countless dying souls. And somewhere in that endless chorus, one voice whispered through the void, faint, distant, defiant. "We remember."